So I'm going to make one more video for you for this week. We left off talking about mammals. The ancestors of the mammals are the Thoraxids, and they appeared at the very end of the Paleozoic during the Permian period. Mammals are different than reptiles in many different ways. The first of which is mammals are warm-blooded organisms, as we mentioned before, meaning they can maintain their body temperature. They're not dependent on the sun. And they also have body hair. That makes them able to colonize the colder parts of the planet. Another difference is that mammals have a four-chambered heart, whereas reptiles only have a three-chambered heart. Since mammals can have a four-chambered heart, they can pump blood faster and more efficiently, and therefore they can maintain their body temperature more easily, and also that allows them to develop a larger brain if necessary. Mammals can also develop specialized teeth. Reptiles' teeth are all basically the same, whereas mammals have molars and incisors and canines and all kinds of different teeth. Plant-eating mammals will have different types of teeth than carnivores. Carnivores have teeth made for killing and tearing into meat. So the Thoraxids are the ancestors of modern-day mammals. They had reptilian characteristics and mammalian characteristics. For example, they had body hair like mammals. They dug burrows underneath the ground. These early mammals were nocturnal. They hunted during the night and slept during the day in the tunnels. And their backbone, though, moved back and forth like a lizard, so they still had reptilian characteristics. Another thing about the Thoraxids is they laid eggs like a reptile instead of giving birth to live young. There's also evidence that mammals had the mammals have females have milk teats, which allow for a baby to grow more mature and have a higher chance of survival. And these Thoraxids had milk teats. They also there's evidence that they had the mothering instinct. One thing that makes mammals different than reptiles is that the mothers have built into their DNA a desire and instinct to protect their young. There's also some evidence that there is a fathering instinct, although it's not as strong. And then we also have some evidence that males and females would pair for life. That's another mammalian characteristic. These mammals were small, and there were just a few species, maybe 3. Plants. There's 4 kinds of plants you need to know about for the final exam. There's the seedless non-vascular plants, the seedless vascular plants, Gymnosperms, and Angiosperms. Don't forget, plants belong to domain Eukarya, kingdom Plantae. Seedless non-vascular plants don't have seeds, as the name implies. They also don't have vascular cells. And these are the most primitive plants. They reproduce by spores instead of seeds. And they include things like moss and lichen. They don't have vascular cells either. Vascular cells are specialized cells found in more advanced plant forms that move food and water throughout the plant through the capillaries of leaves, for example, through the root systems. And so seedless non-vascular plants are very primitive. Think of moss and lichen. They don't have much of a root system. If they do have roots, they're very primitive and just like this. You can see just a few leaves, a few roots going down. Seedless non-vascular plants were the first plants to show up in the rock record or in geologic history. Then we get to the seedless vascular plants, the second plants to show up in Earth history. And when you think of seedless vascular plants, as the name implies, they don't have seeds. They still reproduce by spores. And they include things. The most common one that you need to remember, there's horsetails, but most common one you need to remember is fern plants, or seedless vascular plants. They do have specialized cells in the plant that help move the food and water throughout the plant, so they have a more complicated root system than with the seedless non-vascular plants. They also have leaves and stems. These seedless vascular plants in the next era we're going to talk about during the Mesozoic would be one of the favorite things for dinosaurs, herbivore dinosaurs to eat. Now, what is a spore? A spore contains both sperm and egg. So when a spore gets released, the sperm and egg gets released, and then those combine to make a new plant. Yes, plants are sexual creatures because they have sperm and egg. Now, the third type of plant we need to look at is called the Gymnosperms. And the Gymnosperms, as you can see here, here's a diagram showing you when all the different plants showed up. But the Gymnosperms would end up dominating the forests of the Mesozoic. Gymnosperms are the third plant to show up in the rock record. Probably showed up at the very end of the Paleozoic, but they dominated during the Mesozoic era. Instead of having, nowadays we have grass plains in large parts of the world, plains of grass. Well, grass did not show up until the Cenozoic era. Prior to the grassy plains that we see in places like Kansas and Iowa and Nebraska, we had fern plains. The plains were covered by ferns, these seedless non-vascular plants. Next plants we want to talk about are the Gymnosperms, and these are the first plants that had seeds. And the way Gymnosperm plants work is, think of pine trees, for example. They have cones, and there's a female cone, which everybody likes to collect because they're beautiful and large. And what these female cones really are their ovaries. They're ovaries. They have the eggs inside of the female cones. And the male organ is these things, and they release a powder which we call pollen. And that pollen is really sperm. So in the springtime, the sperm is all over everywhere. I mean, it's on your cars, it's on your house, that powder. So you might want to say, honey, pass the towel. I'm sorry, I'm tired. Oh, okay. So the pollen or the sperm goes through the air and it meets the female cones, and that makes a seed. And the seed is an uncovered seed. Let me show you what a gymnosperm seed looks like versus an angiosperm seed. Angiosperms did not even appear during the Paleozoic. They appeared during the Mesozoic. And here you can see a gymnosperm seed versus an angiosperm seed. Notice that the angiosperm seed has an extra covering on it. Gymnosperm seeds, therefore, are more fragile and easier to get damaged, having a lesser chance of being fertile when planted. Also, in order for gymnosperm seeds to be fertile, for the sperm and egg to meet, they have to be within close proximity to the wind, because the wind is what carries the sperm, which is the pollen, through the air to meet the egg. Angiosperm seeds, though, are called covered seeds because they have that extra covering, and they're relatively large, as you can see here. Angiosperms did not appear during the Paleozoic era. They did not appear until the Mesozoic era. And angiosperms include any plants that are grasses or have fruits or nuts or flowers. If a plant has flowers, fruits, or nuts, or grasses, then they're going to have covered seeds. And the interesting thing about it is the angiosperms use the animal, insect, and bird kingdoms to spread their seed. Fruits attract birds and mammals, and when they eat fruits, they'll release the seeds through their feces, and that fertilizes those seeds. Also, flowers attract insects or hummingbirds, and so the birds and the hummingbirds unknowingly spread the seed great distances. Nuts are attractive to many types of mammals, especially squirrels and chipmunks, and they will dig holes and plant them, and they will become fertile. So angiosperms spread their seed by using the animal kingdom, the birds and the insects, to spread their seed. Any plant that has flowers is an angiosperm. The first flowers did not appear to the Mesozoic era, and the oldest flower known is the magnolia. We see magnolia trees here in Oak Ridge, and there's one in my front yard. They're beautiful, and those are the first flowers, adding color to the natural world. So those are the 4 kinds of plants you need to know about. This shows you some of the most primitive plants. These are that showed up during the Silurian and the Devonian. These are seedless, non-vascular plants. As you can see, it has no root system. It just has 2 spores, and there's not much complexity to it because they don't have vascular cells that transport food and water. So they didn't grow very big. They're very small. Here you can see some of the early vascular plants. These are seedless vascular plants. These may have been the ancestor of fern plants. So a lot of people don't think of plants as being sexual creatures, but they really are. And that's it for this. I think we have enough video for this week since you have a test. And we'll start on chapter 14 next week.